everyone, welcome to the first video of Everything Geography. This is my new channel. I haven't even created the channel yet as of making this video, and I'm pretty much going to talk about anything on this channel, anything that has that relates to the countries of the world or any fun facts about them. But first, before I get to all the other countries, I have to cover my own first. I live in the United States, and there's a lot of things people don't know about the United States, specifically its territories. So today I'm going to be talking about the current and former U.S. territories, things you might not have known about them. First, before I get into the specific territories and go into each one, I'm just going to say what it means to be a territory. The territories, they really don't act like territories. They have their own distinct cultures. They act more like their own countries, but they still retain the title of U.S. territories, and they don't really want to become independent because of the support they get from the United States. Now, the people born in these territories are American citizens. The territories do have governors. They have the same forms of government as the states do. They have a House of Representatives and a Senate. They do send a non-voting member to the U.S. Senate, but they can't file for bankruptcy and they can't vote in presidential elections. Oh, and for some reason, they can have their own Olympic teams, and 4 of them actually do. The first territory we're going to talk about is probably the one that's most known to Americans because of its recent appearance in the news, after the hurricane that recently hit and then their status referendum. In June, they had a status referendum, and the majority of people that actually voted chose that they wanted to be a state. And in reality, Puerto Rico actually has the biggest chance of all the territories at becoming a state because it's the only territory with a population bigger than any of the U.S. states. If it were a state, it would be the 29th most populous. It has about 3.4 million people, so many people that the population is 13 times more than all the other territories combined. But the whole reason that they wanted statehood is because, as I mentioned earlier, U.S. territories can't file for bankruptcy. Puerto Rico, as of now, is over $70 billion in debt, so the whole primary reason that they want to be a state is so that they have the ability to file for bankruptcy. The largest city in all of Puerto Rico, ironically, has about the same population as all of the other U.S. territories combined. By far, the main language spoken in Puerto Rico is Spanish, and they have more Olympic medals than any other territory. They have 9 Olympic medals, and they're the only U.S. territory to have a gold medal. Puerto Rico also elects a new governor every 4 years, and those years line up with presidential elections, and the most recent one was in 2016. Now on to Guam. Guam is the second most populous U.S. territory, and probably the second most relevant because of its military history. The first American shots fired in World War I were in Guam. There's a huge drop-off between the population of Puerto Rico and then the population of Guam. So Puerto Rico has about 3.5 million people. Guam only has 160,000, and their largest city has 45,000 people. They don't have any Olympic medals, and fun fact, they have the only mall in the entire region of Micronesia, creatively titled the Micronesia Mall. Guam also elects a new governor every 4 years, and their most recent election was held in 2014 rather than 2016 when Puerto Rico's were held. The third territory that I'm going to talk about is the Northern Mariana Islands. The Northern Mariana Islands are the least populous territory, but are part of the same archipelago, the same group of islands as Guam, which is the Mariana Archipelago. And you might have heard of the Mariana Trench, which is near Northern Mariana Islands, which is the deepest point on Earth. They have a population of 53,000, as I said, the least populous. Of all the U.S. states and territories, they have the highest percentage of that population living in the capital city. 48,000 out of the 53,000 people in the Northern Mariana Islands live in their capital. They're the only U.S. territory that doesn't have an Olympic team, and their governor elections are held every 4 years. The most recent were held in 2014. The Northern Mariana Islands were the most recent territorial acquisition of the United States, and they became a U.S. territory as recent as 1976. The fourth territory and the last one that's in the Pacific is American Samoa, and American Samoa is probably the least known American territory, but it's interesting because of its relation to the country Samoa, the independent sovereign country. They have a naming dispute with each other. Samoa recently changed its name to Samoa. It used to be called Western Samoa, which American Samoans protested because they felt like that gave their name less distinction, and they're also interesting because American Samoa and Samoa are very close to each other. They're on the same group of islands, but they're on opposite sides of the international date line. If you went from American Samoa to Samoa, you would go a day ahead. And because in 2011, Samoa skipped a day on their calendar, and crossed the international date line, but American Samoa didn't. So American Samoa and Samoa have a lot of differences. American Samoa has only 2,000 more people than the Northern Mariana Islands. So it has 55,000 people. The largest town only has 4,000 people. American Samoa probably has the most distinct culture of all the U.S. territories. They have their own native language, which is Samoan, and their capital is their largest city, so they all live in small villages. But for some reason, it doesn't want to become independent, probably because, as I mentioned earlier, the support they get from the United States. And lastly, governors are elected every 4 years, simultaneous with presidential elections, just like Puerto Rico, and they do have a small Olympic team with no medals so far. The last current territory is another one that's over by Puerto Rico. It's in the Caribbean, the Lesser Antilles region of the Caribbean, the United States Virgin Islands. A funny thing about the Virgin Islands is how it was in the news recently because Donald Trump said that he met with the president of the Virgin Islands, even though he is the president of the Virgin Islands, because the Virgin Islands is a U.S. territory. So people would make fun of him saying, oh, he doesn't even know the U.S. has territories. But, who can blame him? Because most people don't even know, most Americans couldn't even name all 5 territories of the U.S., but the Virgin Islands are near Puerto Rico, and they have a population of about 106,000. The largest city has a population of 18,000. Like Puerto Rico, the territory is in debt, but not as much as Puerto Rico. The Virgin Islands are only $2 billion in debt, and that's obviously not that much. Unlike some of the other territories, the people of the Virgin Islands don't have their own distinct language. Most of them do speak English, but the Virgin Islands are the only U.S. territory that drives on the left side of the road. Also, the Virgin Islands have 1 silver medal from the Olympics, making them the only U.S. territory besides Puerto Rico to have an Olympic medal. Now I'm going to be talking about the former U.S. territories, specifically the ones that have become independent countries. I'm not going to be talking about the territories that have become states, because really most states did used to be territories. And I'm not going to be talking about things like the Panama Canal and Guantanamo Bay, because those are really confusing and no one really understands how those work. And I'm also not going to be talking about the attempted territorial annexations like the Dominican Republic, which never really got farther, never really got to a vote in the Senate. That happened in the 1870s. But the ones I am going to be talking about, as I said, are the ones that became independent countries. And depending on how you interpret it, there could be 4 or 5. And the first one that's kind of disputed is Cuba. After the war that we had, Spain relinquished control of Cuba to the U.S. That was in 1898. But by 1902, we just let Cuba be their own country, and it never really had territorial status. It was just something that was administered by the United States government. The first real territory that ended up becoming its own independent country was the Philippines. Now, with these 4 countries that used to be U.S. territories, I'm going to be going in order of when they became independent. And compared to how long it was under Spanish rule, which was like 330 years or something, the Philippines wasn't administered by the U.S. for very long. And it became independent right after World War II on July 4th, 1946. But some people think it would have been better off as a state, and if it were a state, then it has 100 million people as of now. It's the 13th most populous country in the entire world. So if it were a state, it would of course have the most people of any state, and even 3 times more than California, and it would have 1/4 of the population of the entire U.S. But it ended up becoming its own country. And even today, it still retains a small statehood movement, because they thought some of those people think that they would have been better off under U.S. control, so they could have received funding from the government. The other 3 former U.S. territories that are countries now are in the same region as the Philippines and Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands, and they were part of a group called the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands. And actually, the Northern Mariana Islands is still part of that group because they're still a U.S. territory. But these 3 countries became independent around the same time, and they all have what's called a Compact of Free Association with the United States, which in short guarantees that the United States will protect the countries because they have an insufficient population and they can't maintain an army. So the U.S. has the military authority to occupy the country, and that lasts for 50 years before the compact has to be renewed again. There's more things to the Compact of Free Association than just the military aspect of it, but I'm not going to go into all those for the sake of time. But all these countries, these three countries, have significant ties to the United States economically and in other ways. They all use the US dollar, they all have English as an official language. Two of these countries declared independence in 1979, and their compacts of free association entered into force in 1986. And those countries are the Federated States of Micronesia, which has 4 states, and the Marshall Islands. The Marshall Islands has a population of about 53,000 people, and half of them actually live in the capital. It has a population of about 28,000. The Federated States of Micronesia has a population of 106,000, pretty much the same as the Virgin Islands, and their largest town has 13,000 people. The last former territory of the United States that we're going to talk about today is probably one of the most interesting countries in the world, at least to me. That country is Palau. And unlike the other two countries we just discussed, Palau didn't become independent until 1981 because it was given the option to join the Federated States of Micronesia as their 5th state, because it has a pretty small population. It's actually the 4th least populous country in the world with only 20,000 people. But they ended up deciding not to join the Federated States of Micronesia because they thought they had a distinct culture and they had a distinct language. They have their own regional language called Palauan, and they officially became independent in 1981, and the Compact of Free Association entered into force in 1994, which is officially when they became an independent sovereign state. And you'll probably hear me talk a lot about Palau in future videos because, as I said, Palau is it's probably, to me, one of the most interesting countries. About half the country lives in their largest town, but their capital is actually the smallest capital of any country in the world, and it's modeled off the U.S. capital. Their capital only has 200 people living there, but that's just some basic facts about the country. And I might, as I said, I might talk more about it, but that wraps up this video. Thank you guys for watching this video, my first everything geography video. And this isn't going to be a high quality, really good animation channel. I'm just here to talk about something I have an interest in, which is geography. And if you want to see any video about anything geographical, anything relating to countries of the world and how they work, just comment it down below and I'd be happy to make it because I enjoy talking about geography. I'll have new videos coming soon. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to Everything Geography so I'll come out with new videos soon. And see you guys next time.